Evidence Not Seen, Darlene Deibler Rose. It was Friday the 13th of March, 1942. I have a bit of Irish in me, but I'm not at all superstitious. I truly believe Romans 8:28. All things work together for good. We don't find it difficult to repeat the verse and say we believe it when all things are going well. But when we find ourselves going through deep waters, confronted by trials we don't understand, can we then say, I believe that all things work together for good? At that moment, I couldn't. Everything had happened so fast and without the slightest warning. Russell had said, He will never leave us nor forsake us. No? What about now, Lord? This was one of the times when I thought God had left me, that He had forsaken me. I was to discover, however, that when I took my eyes off the circumstances that were overwhelming me, over which I had no control, and looked up, my Lord was there, standing on the parapet of heaven, looking down. Deep in my heart, He whispered, I'm here. Even when you don't see me, I'm here. Never for a moment are you out of my sight. Was this the Lord? This quietness that was beginning to seep into the crevices of my hurt? Or was it nothing more than shock to find myself abandoned to the caprice of the enemy? I turned toward the house to find Dr. Jaffrey and Margaret waiting for me. I threw my arms around them. Oh, Margaret, thank God they didn't take your dad. And Dr. Jaffrey, what were you doing in the bedroom when the officer was with you? It was puzzling that any consideration had been shown for Dr. Jaffrey's condition, quite out of character for the Japanese we had met previously. I was just putting my eau de cologne in my father's satchel. I figured we should be taken down to the coast. You know how refreshing I find eau de cologne in the humidity, so I thought I would take some along. Eau de cologne? And the officer had thought it was medicine? Oh, Dr. Jaffrey, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that just hilarious? The Lord really tricked that officer into thinking all that eau de cologne was medicine. As I told them about how the officer had cross-examined me concerning Dr. Jaffrey's physical condition, we started to laugh. We laughed until we were weak. Nerves? Perhaps partly. And a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Proverbs 17:22. But beyond that, we realized that God, who knows the end from the beginning, knew how Dr. Jaffrey came to have so many bottles of eau de cologne and how He would use it to confuse a Japanese officer so that He decided to leave him with us, 7 women who needed the physical presence of that man of God. When the sunset and night came on, the full import of my loss hit me again. Russell was gone. We had put another single bed in Margaret's room, and I moved into the house rather than remain alone in the pavilion. We sat down to have prayer. Dr. Jaffrey opened the Daily Light to read March 13. For me and my need, the Lord had directed in the arrangement of the verses. The psalmist echoed the cry of my heart. O my God, my soul is cast down within me. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Trust ye in the Lord forever, for in the Lord Jehovah is everlasting strength. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, and He shall sustain thee. He hath not despised nor abhorred the affliction of the afflicted, neither hath He hid His face from him. But when he cried unto Him, He heard. Is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Lo, I am with you always. Let him pray, the verse said. Mounting the steps into His presence, I prayed, and He came to me with the gift of remembrance of a little girl saying, Lord, I'd go anywhere with you, no matter what it cost. Was that but an expression of childish enthusiasm resulting from an emotion-packed presentation in the mission field? I meant it then, my Lord, to the level of my understanding. With greater understanding, I confirm to you tonight, it is still anywhere. I leave the costing to you. He took my hand, and together we walked into a future yet unknown. But from that moment, the sting was gone from the wound. When we went to Bentingtingi with a minimum of supplies, we had no idea that our internment there would stretch into a year, followed by 3 more years in various camps and prisons. Consequently, in order to survive, it was necessary to be ingenious about our food sources. The first time one of the mountain women, whom I had led to the Lord, came with a half coconut shell filled with goodies that had been fried in coconut oil, I accepted them gladly. I tried one and found it delicious, then remembered that I had seen the native children the day before out on the mountainside collecting insects. Could this be? Racing, are these flying ants? I'm glad you like them, Nonja. I'll get you some more. We also ate various weeds and jungle plants. Ferns are truly delicious. I had learned to eat them from the Indonesians. There was one weed that had a tiny blue flower. The Dutch called it Hemels Blauwe Ogen, heavenly blue eyes. We renamed it watercress, feeling that our nomenclature made it taste better. Wherever the Japanese went, they planted Spanish needles. We boiled them like vegetable greens. The finished product was something like boiled okra, very gooey and slimy. From Racing, we obtained some seeds and started a garden. We never ceased to be grateful to our spiritual family from the Makassar Tabernacle, who, learning of our plight, risked their lives to bring food to us, lest we starve to death before our garden matured. Without their help, we might have done just that, for no rations were given us by the Japanese. In the face of extreme punishment, if apprehended, our friends came over the mountain behind the property, bringing what rations they could afford and carry. They also brought whatever news they could glean about Russell and Ernie. War news had a Japanese flavor. The whole of the Far East had surrendered to them. Our friends had kept our house in Makassar under close surveillance. Soon after the surrender of the city, Japanese soldiers had forced entry into our house and storeroom. My trunks of wedding gifts were dragged into the yard and the locks forced. Whatever the soldiers didn't want, they scattered about the driveway. Our new refrigerator was carried outside by several Japanese who, 1, 2, 3, threw it so hard that when it crashed on the gravel, the door flew open and irreparable damage was done to it. Bit by bit, treasured keepsakes and souvenirs were being wrested from me. I was being taught to live so that my most treasured mementos took the form of beautiful memories stored in the file of my heart, where moth and rust and Japanese soldiers could not corrupt or destroy. Whatever he allowed us of creature comforts, we were free to enjoy. If he chose to allow others to take them from us, that was his prerogative. Japanese soldiers visited at regular intervals as they passed Bintentinji on their ships to and from Malino. We were in constant dread of their harassment, and, apart from God, there was no protection against the power-hungry who might choose to avenge himself on us as symbols of the hated American enemy. One day after the soldiers were gone, Margaret and I ran into Dr. Jaffrey's bedroom to see if they had taken his watch. Ordinarily, it hung on a velvet holder set on the table at the foot of his bed. It was gone. "Dr. Jaffrey, did they get your watch?" He answered by lifting his pillow, retrieving his flashlight and the watch, and returning them to their usual places. Time after time, when the marauding soldiers had left the property, Dr. Jaffrey lifted his pillow and took from under it his watch and flashlight. Whenever I hear the Japanese have been sighted, I put them on the bed and pull the pillow down over them. I remind the Lord that neither of them means a thing to the Japanese, but they do to me. The watch is my father's. The Lord knows I need it, and the flashlight, they don't. His confident expectancy that the watch and flashlight would always be there thrilled me, a practical lesson in faith. It was not until some time after the war that I realized the flashlight had burned the entire time we were under house arrest in the mountains. Although used every night, the batteries were never replaced. Nor could they have been, for we had no access to new ones, a miracle of God's provision. Lumber that has not been properly dried is not the best material with which to build a house, but this was a kind that had been used in the Jaffrey's house. As the lumber shrank, openings appeared between the planks of the single-walled house. Rats could enter without having to expend energy gnawing their way in. They were looking for food and a dry nesting place as the rains had already started. Where better than the missionaries? We had no rice or other food to share, and we couldn't afford to have them gnawing the leather of our shoes or using our clothes, paper, or books for lining their nests. So Margaret and I declared all-out war on them. Afternoons, while it was still light enough to see, we started in the bedrooms at the back of the house, running the rats down the hall and into the kitchen where the doors fit tightly and the walls had no holes. Then each of us, armed with a broom, fought the rats until we had killed all we had corralled. We squealed and yelled when the rats ran up the wall and jumped on us. It was a nasty business, and I especially disliked the cleanup job that was necessary after the kill. One night, my rest was disturbed by what I thought were rats. I could hear them moving around the living room, in the dining room, and along the halls. I tried to ignore them with a promise, "I'll get you tomorrow." But when I heard a book fall on the floor, that did it. I jumped up, giving Margaret's bed a shake, and called, "Margaret, grab your robe. We'll light the lamps and have another go at the rats." I've been hearing them from one end of the house to the other. A hall ran the full length of the house. Our bedrooms and the kitchen opened off it, with the living dining room on one end and a bathroom on the other. When I pulled the bedroom door open in the dim light of a little night lamp, I saw someone swish past me. I thought it was Dr. Jaffrey, and I was perplexed at his strange behavior in the middle of the night. When I stepped out into the hall to get a better look, I found myself face to face with a bogus bandit. He was wearing a black sarong that he swooped over his shoulder to free his machete. With one fluid movement, the knife was extricated from his belt and held up in a striking position. I'm really quite a coward, and why I rushed at him, I have no idea. Perhaps it was the element of surprise, but he was a bigger coward than I, for he turned and fled down the hall, through the bathroom, across the porch, and down over the mountainside with me, hot on his heels, until I saw others emerge from the jungle. He yelled something in their language, and together they fled. I stopped dead. "Lord," I whispered, "what a stupid thing for me to do." Immediately he answered, "The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and delivereth them." I went back to the house and reached to pull shut the door that was standing wide open. There was no doorknob, no lock or key. Instead, I pulled the door toward me to find a porthole carved in the door by the intruder with his long knife. Dr. and Mrs. Jaffrey were now awake and had joined Margaret. "What happened?" Dr. Jaffrey asked, much shaken by the noise inside of the damaged door. "We had bandits. They must have been here for hours. I thought they were rats." A tour of inspection proved that tablecloths and other linens were missing. Books had been pulled from the shelves and searched, probably by someone expecting to find money hidden in them, and I had thought they were rats. They curiously had taken panes out of Dr. Jaffrey's bedroom windows and laid them carefully on the porch so that we might replace them. None of the noise had awakened Dr. Jaffrey. I found a board and nailed the door shut. From that night on, we slept with a club at the foot of our bed and a small milk can, squawker, under our pillows, but we never had to use them. We heard bandits return several nights after that, but they never again entered the house. It wasn't until after the war that I learned why. I had suspected that Jaffrey's gardener. He was bogus, and he knew the layout of the house. When I asked him why they had never entered the house again, he answered incredulously, "Because of those people you had there, those people in white who stood about the house." The Lord had put his angels around us. He had delivered. One day the Japanese stopped at Bintentinji with a Dutch nurse, a friend of mine, who was being transferred from a prison in Makassar to Malino. They allowed the nurse to get out of the car and come inside. As they left the house to continue on to the Dutch camp, the nurse slipped a fountain pen into Ruth's hand, and Ruth recognized it as Ernie's and wondered why he would be sending it to her. As soon as the truck left the property, with hands shaking with excitement, she began to take the pen apart. Sure enough, rolled into a tight cylinder and secreted in the tiny ink tube was a letter. We were all feverish with excitement by this time. Ernie wrote that he and Russell were imprisoned in the police barracks in Makassar, but expected to be moved soon. They had sufficient food and were well. Ruth shared the letter with us all until we knew it by heart. Like thirsty people returning to the fountain, Ruth read and reread the letter to us. We discussed it and pondered it, not wishing to miss some hidden message. That was an exciting day. At least we knew where they were and that they were well.